For the Belmont, there's nothing to put together, nothing to assemble. In there you have got your 3 spikes, reservoir and filter, heating coil, and patient line. Right out of the box, you do want to close off these 3 blue clamps right here, otherwise you'll get what is known as the Belmont baptism. Number 2, check these, come on guy. Check this blue lure lock right here, and this one right here. It's pretty uncommon, but sometimes during transportation they'll rattle themselves loose, so we work under pressure. Those were to separate during the middle of the case, a literal bloodbath. So, setup is super easy. You guys can handle shapes and colors, right? Got those on lockdown? Okay. Right hand reservoir, left hand heating coil. Step 1, we're gonna snap that guy into place. Heating coil. It's gonna go into the obvious spot with the red arrow pointed at you and up. From that point, we're just gonna match red to red. We're gonna come around this air trap, will fit right here in this little indention. It gets held into place by tucking the tubing in right here. I take a hot second just to talk about that because that's one of our top 3 troubleshooting areas. This is an air sensor, it's ultrasonic, so it's looking through the tubing trying to sense air. So if you're in a hurry, and I completely understand why sometimes, it's only in halfway or 3/4 of a way, what's on the outside of tubing? Air. So it could potentially give you an air message or an alarm that's really not real. Takeaway is this, take a hot second just to tuck that tubing in all the way. You can see these 2 lines split by the colors on the back here, and we're going to follow it on around. This interlock block fits right here like a book on a shelf. We're going to push that baby in there. It's even got a blue arrow pointing in. What we're doing there is we're engaging the other air sensor, which is the primary. From that point in time, you got a big blue line, you got a big blue tube, little line, little tube. I'm sure you can make sense of what happens there. We're going to close the door. So we have loaded it up with the power off, and for sake of time, we've already connected a bag of fluids, but you wouldn't have a bag of fluids connected at this point. From this standpoint, do you guys have any questions?
You don't need to prime it first?
No, it's going to prime itself.
All right.
Perk the bags mean, whoever that came from.
It was me.
Yeah, so it's going to prime itself,
Okay.
which is the very next step we're going to get to. But good question. Power button right here on the back. It is going to go through a couple seconds of self-test and tell us what to do, which is connect a bag of fluids. For the sake of time, I have already done that. It's going to tell you to unclamp and hit prime. Maybe. There you go. What's happening is there's a countdown from 100 right here. We're flushing 100 mLs of fluid through this system, forcing the air out through this recirculating line and through this vent, so it's priming itself. I think that's what you were alluding to, right? Yeah. In a matter of 12 seconds, it has primed itself. Now that's the inlet tubing. We do have to do the patient line next. The good news is we only have to do it one time and one time only. What this message tells you is exactly what I'm about to. If I press the patient line prime, you'll see fluid starts to come through at 50 mLs a minute. However, if you press and hold, it'll go 4 times faster at 200 mLs a minute. Chances are when a rapid infuser comes out, this is what you're going to want to do because you need it in a hurry. However, you do have both options. Once we have visually made sure all the air is out of the line, we're going to hit stop. This is our patient. Connect directly to the hub of the catheter. Anything you put in between, such as like these J-loops, pigtails, whatever you want to call them, stopcocks, one-ways. You're not going to harm anything, but you are going to restrict your flow, which we'll talk about a little bit further down the line. So that's the setup. That is the prime. Any questions to this point? Boom.
So you put the cartridge in the machine before it turned the power on. If you turn the power on, will it affect anything? Because most people...
It'll give you an alarm, because anytime the door's open and the power's on,
Okay,
it'll start
that's
beeping
what I
at
was
you.
going to say.
Yep.
Most of us turn the machine on first and then...
And that makes sense for a lot of other equipment. For this one, just load it up dry, load it up, power off, smooth sailing. Any other questions? I think I saw another hand. Same question? Gotcha. So, so again, that is the setup and that's the prime. If there are no other questions, I will move on to the operation, of which, honestly, I mean, it's your guys' call, but I would suggest you guys coming up to the front to see the screen, because for those in the back, you're probably not going to get anything out of this. But we're ready to hit.
They're going to be the ones using it most of them.
And I can go over it again for you guys, but I just...
He's Becky.
I used to get blood all the time. So.
All right, I'll get up
Okay.
close and personal here.
There you go. We got more coming, maybe, or maybe I bored them to death and they're just leaving.
I get such a bad glare. It's not good. Oh.
Okay. Everybody good? So, if you're like me, the first time I saw the Belmont screen, I was like, whoa, that's busy. So that's why I like to break it down like this. Everything above my hand, these 4 boxes right here, these are your status buttons. This is telling you what's going on. Everything below, these are our action buttons. This is what I can touch. This is what I can control. So we got our set rate right here, of which we can go as low as 2.5 mLs a minute, or it can go as fast as 750 mLs a minute. Now, keep in mind, everything with this machine is in minutes. We can change our set rate by touching it right here. We can also press and hold and it will scroll and go faster. There's also a quick set 500 button that I like for a couple scenarios, one of which I'll show here in a little bit. So we've got our set rates. We have our volume. So this is a cumulative total for the entire infusion. So whether it's 10 minutes or 10 hours, it's going to keep a tally for you for charting purposes until you shut the machine off. The bad news about that is, once you shut the machine off, that information is gone forever, so just make sure you get it. This is our back pressure readout. That'll make more sense here in a little bit, but it's constantly measuring back pressure for patient safety. And then you also have your temperature right here, which you'll see as we get up and running. It'll stay between 37 and 37.5, which is normothermia. It's automatic. It's just part of the great technology. There's nothing you can do about it. You can't turn it off, change it, or manipulate it in any way. And it can take FFB or some slushy fluids and turn them into normothermia just like that. The thing about that, though, I do like to mention, I'm leaking, Belmont baptism, I did it to myself. It does not have the capability to cool. So if you take fluids out of a warmer and put them in here, we have an over-temp alarm at 39.5. So it's an easy fix, just don't put warm fluids in there. But if you were to put warm fluids in there that are above that threshold, then it will instantly give you an alarm, and it will not let you proceed until the fluids are below that. Again, it's all for patient safety. Make sense? All right, so are there any questions before I move on to a couple demonstrations? Okay, too early, or I'm just an amazing teacher, right? All right, so I mentioned earlier I like this 500 key for a couple of scenarios. This would be one of them. So the scenario is patient is bleeding out in front of you. You need to get up and running quickly. I like hitting this 500 button. Now keep in mind, you can still go to 750, but 500 is a pretty good rate, agreed?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to pinch this off to simulate a smaller catheter size. And watch as this pressure grows right here and reaches 300, what it does to the 500 that I've told it to do. And see how that starts beeping at you and flashing? That's the pressure control. And so it's regulating itself. So whenever the pressure gets too high, it's going to drop the rate back down until to release pressure, rate pressure, rate pressure. So to silence that alarm, you would have to manually scroll this down to whatever that number it was regulating itself out. Obviously, it would be more consistent with the catheter in there than me pinching it, but I think you guys get the point, right? So that will keep beeping at you. That is one on the newer machines. There's kind of something different we did with that, but for this machine, still is good that it's regulating itself, but it is annoying that it's beeping at you and flashing and not telling you what's going on. That's what's going on. Whenever this is flashing, it's regulating itself and it's saying, hey, we're not giving you what you desired. And again, it's all for patient safety. Make sense? Okay. Next up, we are going to run out of fluid because that happens, right? So I've clamped this off. You'll hear a whistling or a little chirping. All that is air trying to get in this one way. It's a helpful reminder that you're about to run out of fluid, but it is annoying for these scenarios. Well, watch as the fluid starts to run out and air hits this sensor right here. What happens down here in this corner with that patient safety one? Did you guys see that? So what happens anytime you have an alarm, especially an air alarm, our patient safety wand right here is going to slide over and pinch off. Going to pinch off the patient line containing all of the air into the internal tubing there. That's why you never have to detach from the patient, because none of that air ever hits the patient line. It's going to tell us what to do next, which is connect a bag of fluids and hit reprime. And just like before, count down from 100. All that air that was just in here is now being purged out, and in a matter of 12 seconds, you're back in business.
And that was 11 seconds.
Questions on that? A couple other features here and a couple nuggets of information will get you out of here. Bolus. We're not going to do a deep dive into this, but this is used. It's popular in pediatrics, but also in those scenarios when a physician wants to give a specific amount of fluid, so it's a volume target. If you want to focus on, if those that can see this area where it says volume, when I press and hold bolus, it'll run through our options, which you have options of 100, 200, 400, and 500, and 1,000. 100, 200, 400, 500, 1,000, yes. It's revolving, so that's why you don't have to memorize those options. So these options will come up. So say I wanted 200, and I missed it, it'll come right back around to me. 200 is my target. That's how far into the target I am. I still have control over how fast or how slow I want to deliver that 200. But the takeaway is this: once we hit our target, in this case 200, it'll beep at you, stop, and go into standby mode and not do anything else until you tell it what to do next, whether that's another bolus, regular infusion, nothing at all. That's your guys' choice. But again, for delivering specific amounts of fluid. Good? Okay. Recirculate. There are two main purposes for recirculate. So, say you've gone into standby mode for a while and you're in there for 1 minute or 10 minutes, whatever, doesn't matter, and you're worried about your blood getting stagnant and clotting in the line because you've been in standby mode, it's not moving, right? By hitting this recirculating button, or recirc button, it grabs the fluid, runs it through the circuit, but instead of sending it out to the patient, you can see our patient safety wand is slid over, so you're not infusing, but it's then redirecting it to the recirculation line back up. So it's like a little mini racetrack, keeping it turned and mixed up for you, so you don't have to worry about your blood clotting. The other thing it's doing is it's also warming at the same time, which leads me to scenario 2. So this machine has 30 minutes of backup battery power, of which you can infuse at a max rate of 50 mLs a minute. However, when it's on battery power, notice it's flashing no heating, so it does not actively warm on battery power. So the workaround for that is the recirculate button. So the scenario is this: you're transferring a patient from the OR to the ICU. So while it's plugged in, hit this recirculate button, let it run for a couple of minutes, because as it's doing this thing right here, between here and here, you can actually pre-warm about 200 mLs of fluid, so that way when you do unplug and you're walking down the hallway, you've pre-warmed your fluids. Delivering warm fluids, you get to your destination, you plug it in, and it's business as usual. Questions on that? Okay, so the reason I talk so much about flow rate or the lack thereof is because it's by far our #1 troubleshooting area, just not getting the desired rate that you would like to get or feed should get. Catheter size plays a huge role in this. I think probably everybody knows that. I didn't know this until someone pointed it out to me, but it actually on your catheter packaging will tell you what the max flow rate is. So this being a 18, there's 95, 14, 350. So if you're ever in question, just look at the packaging of the catheter and it will tell you. So catheter size plays a role. Catheter length also plays a role. And this is just sheer physics. For every 2 inches of catheter length, you lose 30% flow. A common example of this in the calls that I get, typically in the ICU with the triple lumen, you have your 3, the middle one, 6, it's a 16 gauge, but it's roughly 20 centimeters long, so about 8 inches. And like I said, for every 2 inches of catheter length, you lose 30% flow. So 30%, 30%, 30%. So the call I get is, but Kyle, it's a 16 gauge. It just takes that much more force to fire that fluid down that narrow corridor, creating back pressure that the machine senses and regulates itself. We've already talked about accessories. Those can also can dictate kind of what your max flow rate is. And then also the placement, good placement, bad placement, and even the health of your patient's veins, not that you can do anything about it. But just the reason I mention all these things is because the machine does not care where the back pressure comes from. It's going to sense it, it's going to regulate itself, and therefore, maybe not giving you the desired rate that you're looking for or what you feel you should be getting. But the more you know about all the factors up front and what the byproduct is on the back end, the more you know you need to change to get that desired rate. Hopefully that makes sense. Good. Lastly, things that are good to run through the Belmont. You're good with red blood, whole blood, FFP, albumins, crystalloids. Those are all good. More importantly, what not to run through the Belmont. No cryo, no platelets, no LR. Cryo's natural reaction when warmed is to stick to plastic. So you think you're delivering it to the patient, and in all reality, most of it's sticking to the inside of the tubing. So it's not that you're doing harm to the machine or the patient. You're just not doing any good, and it's wasteful. Platelets, we're a wheel pump. Beats them up, chews them up, basically renders them useless. So same concept. You're not doing harm to the patient. You're not doing harm to the machine, but it's useless and it's wasteful. LR is a tricky one, at least in my opinion. So there's actually a sticker right here that says no LR. The reason I think it's tricky because LR by itself is 100% fine. However, LR and blood together has a tendency to clot, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you were to prime me with LR, what's the next thing you would normally send down through the chute? A blood product of some kind, right? Takeaway is this: you have other options. You have saline, you have plasma light. Just don't use LR. Save yourself that pending disaster. But in that rare occurrence that you just want to warm some LR for a dehydrated patient, it's actually totally fine. It's the combination of the blood with it. And that's the show.